was Helios 522. It had been circling in Greek skies for over an hour. It refused to land and did not respond to any communication signals from air traffic control. Even more strangely, it was later discovered that no one was piloting it. Helios 522, is anyone there? Those were the last sounds repeatedly heard on the cockpit radar. Yet, the 121 passengers and crew gave no response. Why was that? What happened in Greece 20 years ago? Shocking the world aviation industry. Welcome to today's broadcast program. Flight 522 claimed 121 lives in Greek skies. And before starting this mysterious flight, don't forget to like, subscribe to Hati, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our latest content. Now, let's begin with the main content. On August 14, 2005, Helios Flight 522 was ready on the runway awaiting takeoff clearance. According to schedule, the aircraft would depart from Larnaca International Airport in Cyprus at 9 a.m., arrive in Athens at 10:45 a.m., and end its journey in Prague at 1:10 p.m. With a total flight time of 4 hours and 10 minutes, on board were 115 passengers and 6 crew members. The captain of this flight was Hans-Jürgen Mothen, 59 years old, German. He was an experienced pilot with 16,900 flight hours, including 5,500 hours on Boeing 737. The co-pilot was Pembroke Jadalomo, a Cypriot pilot, 51 years old, with 7,549 flight hours. Everything initially proceeded completely normally. Helios Flight 522 received takeoff and departed from Larnaca International Airport at 9:07 a.m. 5 minutes later, when the aircraft reached an altitude of 3,670 meters, the alarm bell in the cockpit suddenly sounded. Both the captain and co-pilot thought it was a takeoff configuration warning, because normally, this warning only occurs when the aircraft is lying on the runway. It is a signal indicating the aircraft is experiencing issues. A few minutes later, the aircraft's cooling equipment and main alarm system also issued warning signals. At this point, the captain still didn't know that the oxygen masks in the passenger cabin had been activated. 9:14 a.m., Hans-Jürgen Mothen called air traffic control. The coordinator at the center immediately called the ground engineer, on duty to communicate with the captain. The captain repeatedly said that the cooling ventilation fan light had gone out. The engineer asked him to confirm whether the pressurization panel was set to automatic mode. However, the captain didn't answer this question, but instead asked about the location of the cooling switch. Everything gradually became fragmented as the captain showed signs of oxygen and couldn't continue the information exchange. 9:20 a.m., the conversation between the captain and ground engineer ended. At 9:23, the plane reached an altitude of 10,360 meters and switched to autopilot mode. At 9:37, the plane entered Greek airspace. Nicosia Air Traffic Control notified Athens Air Traffic Control that they had lost contact with Helios Flight 522, but still saw the plane on the radar screen, continuing to fly along the correct route towards Athens International Airport. However, Flight 522 did not follow the landing procedure at Athens Airport, but maintained an altitude of about 10,000 meters and began circling in the sky above the capital. From 10:12 to 10:50, Athens Air Traffic Control contacted Flight 522 19 times, but received no response. The situation became very serious, because the September 11 terrorist attacks in the US had occurred less than 4 years earlier, so losing contact with the plane for over an hour led to concerns that Flight 522 had been attacked by terrorists. Moreover, Athens is the capital of Greece with a population of over 3 million people. If the plane crashed into the urban area, the consequences would be catastrophic. The Greek government thought so they immediately implemented response measures. At 10:55, the Greek military chief of staff ordered the deployment of 2 F-16 fighter jets to check the situation. At 11:24, they caught up with Flight 522. The 2 F-16s maintained combat status. One closely followed the plane's tail, ready to attack. The other flew around to observe. The observation results made the atmosphere even more tense and strange. The fighter pilot reported that the Helios aircraft was completely undamaged, but the captain had disappeared from the cockpit. The co-pilot was in a coma, and the entire passenger cabin was dark. Thanks to sunlight shining through the opposite window, they saw that the oxygen masks had deployed. Passengers were all wearing masks and sitting still in their seats. There were no signs of a terrorist attack. At 11:49, the fighter pilot suddenly saw a man wearing a light blue shirt. Still in a dark jacket, enter the cockpit, sit in the captain's seat and put on headphones. Immediately after, the plane suddenly turned left and flew north. A few minutes later, it crashed into the ground. The accident of Flight 522 attracted worldwide attention and was widely reported by the media. Because the cause of the accident was too mysterious, the identity of the man who appeared last remained unknown. Added with media coverage, Helios Flight 522 was called the ghost flight by people. After the accident to search for survivors and extinguish the fire after the plane explosion, the Greek government mobilized 35 fire trucks, 8 firefighting aircraft, 3 helicopters and many ambulances to the scene. At the scene, the plane rolled wildly for about 500 meters after hitting the ground before stopping. Except for the tail and cockpit, the entire fuselage was almost shattered into pieces. All 121 people on board died. The severely damaged black box was sent to Bradbury's for analysis. The bodies of the victims found in the wreckage were taken to the hospital for examination. Pham, the head of the investigation team, said all passengers were still breathing and their hearts were beating before the plane crashed. They did not die from toxic gas suffocation or freezing on the plane. But the main cause was the impact from the crash. This conclusion made the accident even more mysterious. What happened? The investigation committee later announced important clues and reconstructed the entire incident through flight simulation. A few hours before takeoff, on August 14, 2005. This plane was maintained because the crew detected frost and strange noises around the rear door. Therefore, the airline had all the doors inspected. The person performing the inspection was a ground engineer, who was also the last person to speak with the captain. After a series of tests, he concluded that the aircraft door was not leaking air or making strange noises, and then signed a technical log. At the accident scene, search personnel discovered a control panel in the wreckage of the plane. This discovery provided a breakthrough in the investigation. Modern passenger aircraft are equipped with a pressurization system with 2 modes, automatic and manual. As the plane flies higher, the air becomes thinner. The cockpit and passenger cabin must be pressurized to ensure everyone on board can breathe normally. Otherwise, like a mountaineer without an oxygen tank climbing Mount Everest, the consequences would be unpredictable. Therefore, when flying at high altitudes, the pressurization system is usually set to automatic. It automatically adjusts the cabin pressure according to the aircraft's altitude to ensure everyone can breathe normally, and to ensure the air in the cabin circulates. Maintaining sufficient oxygen and pressure balance, there is a small air vent at the tail of the plane. If the aircraft door is not sealed, air leakage would endanger the flight and could even lead to an accident. After thorough inspection, investigators determined that this control panel remained in its original state from before it was found. The switch was in manual mode. This means the ground engineer did not follow the correct pressurization procedure. The standard procedure is to switch the pressurization system from automatic to manual mode before inspection. And after the inspection is completed, switch it back to automatic mode. But this switch remained in manual mode, meaning it could not automatically adjust the cabin pressure according to the aircraft's altitude, so everyone could not breathe normally, including the pilots. This was a fatal mistake, and it's very likely that no one realized this serious issue even after the plane took off. So, was the manual mode of the pressurization system the cause of the accident? Is there any other evidence? At this point, the contents of the black box became extremely important, since the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks in the US, for safety reasons. Cockpit doors on flights have been equipped with secret locks. Flight 522 is no exception. To open the door, it must be opened from inside by a pilot or from outside by someone who knows the code. After DNA analysis and examination of the cockpit voice recorder in the black box, it was determined that the man who entered the cockpit was not a hijacker as everyone thought, but one of the 6 crew members, a male flight attendant. His name was Andres Bromo. Andres entered the code to access the cockpit at 11:48. Less than a minute after he sat in the captain's seat, the left engine of the plane stopped due to fuel exhaustion. This caused the plane to suddenly turn left and begin descending. After the engine stopped, abnormal flight data showed that Andres attempted to manually control the plane. At 11:54, the cockpit voice recorder captured Andres sending a Mayday distress signal. Mayday is an international emergency signal used in radio communication, issued in life-threatening situations. When sending a Mayday signal, it must be repeated 3 times consecutively to avoid being misheard or interfered with by other sounds. However, because the radio frequency was still set to the airport's frequency from when the plane took off, Air Traffic Controller Arthur did not hear his distress call. At 11:59, Flight 22 unexpectedly changed course to the southwest. That was when the right engine ran out of fuel, causing the aircraft to rapidly descend and crash into the ground. Based on clues, the investigation committee concluded that the accident was not due to a terrorist attack, but was likely caused by a loss of cabin pressure leading to oxygen deprivation. To verify this conclusion, they decided to conduct a simulation test. 4 months after the accident, the investigation committee used an aircraft of the same type flying the same route, taking off at the same time and performing identical maneuvers as reported in the black box data. The simulation results showed that 5 minutes after takeoff, an alarm sounded in the cockpit. It was a cabin pressure loss alarm, not a takeoff call as the captain thought. Because these 2 types of warnings have similar sounds, they are difficult to distinguish. Subsequently, the cooling system in the aircraft's main alarm system also triggered warning signal. The captain believed that the aircraft's air conditioning system had malfunctioned because this system had previously experienced issues and had just been repaired before takeoff. So he immediately thought the air conditioning was broken. Therefore, in the final conversations, he asked where the cooling switch was. In reality, the temperature in the cabin did not rise. It was just a side effect of the cabin not being pressurized. Since the pressurization system was still in manual mode, it could not automatically pressurize the cabin. As the aircraft continued to climb, the oxygen level in the cabin quickly decreased. At an altitude of 5,486 meters, passengers had to wear oxygen masks that automatically drop down to await an all-clear announcement from the cockpit. However, the cockpit is not like the passenger cabin. The oxygen masks here do not automatically deploy when oxygen levels drop. Thus, the captain still did not realize the problem, and the aircraft continued to climb rapidly. At that rate of ascent, an ordinary person suddenly exposed to the environment at 10,000 meters would only have about 50 seconds of consciousness. Therefore, the investigation committee speculated that the captain stood up to look for the cooling switch in the back, when the oxygen in the cockpit was depleting, leading to fainting. The co-pilot also did not realize the issue, so he eventually passed out in the pilot's seat. When both pilots were unconscious, the aircraft continued flying on its previous settings, reaching an altitude of 10,363 meters and switching to autopilot, continuing for Athens. One person in the passenger cabin at that time still did not know what was happening. 12 minutes later, the oxygen in the masks ran out, and they fell into a coma. This Boeing 737 aircraft was only equipped with an emergency oxygen supply system in the passenger cabin to handle sudden depressurization. Afterward, the aircraft would automatically descend to an emergency altitude of 3,048 meters, where humans can breathe normally. This explains why all the passengers on the aircraft fell asleep while still wearing oxygen masks. When approaching Athens International Airport, due to no one controlling it, the aircraft automatically switched the holding pattern and circled in the air. Hence the strange sight of the aircraft endlessly circling the sky. 1 year after the accident, Helios Airways had its bank accounts frozen by the government and had to cease operations. The Greek government also released an official report on the Helios Flight 522 accident. The report stated that the cause of the deadliest aviation accident in Greek history was a series of errors by the flight crew, failing to switch the pressurization system from manual to automatic mode, leading to cabin pressure loss. However, even after the official cause was given, some mysteries remained unresolved. That is why, when everyone in the passenger cabin was unconscious, someone remained alert hours after takeoff. The flight attendant who appeared last in the cockpit, Andres, was said to have swapped shifts with a colleague to fly with his girlfriend, also a flight attendant. He was a former Special Forces soldier with excellent physical fitness. He also held a commercial pilot license and had over 200 hours of flight training, but had never been trained to fly a Boeing 737. The investigative committee speculated that, after noticing the abnormal situation and being unable to contact the cockpit, Andres decided to handle the situation himself before the oxygen in the passenger cabin masks ran out. He found 4 portable oxygen cylinders on the plane, each usable for about 1 hour. At the accident scene, these 4 cylinders were also discovered, with 3 of them already used. This explains why he remained conscious while others had fainted. His girlfriend might have also been conscious, and he likely entered the cockpit multiple times. During the post-accident investigation, DNA of the co-pilot was found on the oxygen mask in the cockpit. The investigative committee surmised that Andres used the oxygen mask to try to wake the co-pilot but failed. Then, realizing time was running out, Andres sat in the captain's seat, fumbled to turn off the autopilot and tried to call for help, but it was too late. Based on the accounts of the F-16 fighter pilot and the impact marks on the ground, the investigative committee believed that Andres, lacking experience, attempted to control the plane until it crashed to reduce impact force. But under such harsh conditions and extreme psychological pressure, almost no one could control a Boeing 737 that was out of control due to fuel exhaustion. In his hometown, Andres was buried with his girlfriend near the accident site in the suburbs of Athens. A memorial was also erected to commemorate the victims of this accident. Andres' father commented on his son as follows: "He was not a coward, but a brave, courageous, and calm person, because his dream was to become a pilot." 20 years have passed since the disaster occurred, yet the chain of multiple errors from maintenance, crew, to air traffic control remains a costly lesson for the global aviation industry. For Greece alone, Helios Airways Flight 522 is still considered the most catastrophic accident in the country's history. All 121 lives were lost forever, in a way they probably never expected. What thoughts does today's story evoke in you? Please leave your comments below for us to know. Finally, don't forget to like and subscribe to our Kanha TV channel to receive more fascinating stories. And now, goodbye and see you in the next videos.
If the veil stirred, subscribe and meet the next encounter.